The 1980s gave us cartoon icons, Transformers, He-Man, the Ninja Turtles. But hidden beneath the hits were stranger experiments, characters so odd you'd swear someone dreamed them up after a long night. From floating puzzle cubes to teenagers who morphed into cars, the decade produced mascots that baffled kids and confused parents. Some lasted a season, others vanished faster than their toys hit shelves. Today, we're revisiting 15 of the weirdest cartoon characters of the 80s. Once you see them, you'll never forget them. Rubik, the Amazing Cube, 1983. When the Rubik's Cube became a worldwide sensation in the early 80s, you'd think toy companies would be content just selling puzzles. But no, someone thought, what if the cube talked? Thus, Rubik the Amazing Cube was born. He floated, he had a squeaky voice, and he sprouted enormous cartoon eyes. His powers were inconsistent, sometimes teleporting entire buildings, sometimes just glowing nervously. Rubik hung out with 3 Hispanic siblings, Carlos, Lisa, and Ronaldo, and helped them out of sticky situations. In hindsight, he was both progressive, one of the first Saturday morning shows to feature a Hispanic family as leads, and deeply unsettling. The idea of a toy suddenly sprouting a face and chattering away left more kids uneasy than entertained. The show only lasted 13 episodes, vanishing almost as quickly as it arrived. Today, Rubik stands as a punchline from the toy-to-TV craze of the 80s, proof that not every craze deserved a cartoon. Turbo Teen, 1984. You know how superheroes transform into something powerful? The Hulk gets stronger, Spider-Man swings through the city. Brett Matthews, though, turned into a sports car whenever he got too hot. Yes, Turbo Teen's entire premise was that a teenager literally morphed into a Corvette-style vehicle if his body temperature rose. The transformation sequences were infamous, limbs stretching into tires, a torso melting into a hood, a face distorting into a grill. Audiences weren't sure whether to laugh or look away. Each week, Brett, his friends, and his dog solved crimes with this bizarre gift, while the show never explained the science behind it. Imagine sweating in class and suddenly turning into a car. It was unintentionally horrifying, and yet impossible to forget. Turbo Teen only lasted 13 episodes, but it became a cult legend, referenced in parodies, comedy sketches, and internet jokes. A reminder that in the 80s, no idea was too weird to animate. The Biscuits, 1983. Tiny blue Smurfs dominated TV screens, so naturally Hanna-Barbera thought, why not tiny dogs? Enter the Biscuits, an island community of miniature pups sworn to guard their kingdom's treasure. They squeaked, they scampered, they had exaggerated features that made them look more like plush dolls than actual canines. Each had a personality quirk, brave, mischievous, cowardly, that felt like a rehash of Smurf Village. The problem was, it all came off too saccharine, even for children. Critics quickly called it a knockoff, and audiences agreed. The Biscuits lasted just 13 episodes before quietly fading. What's fascinating now is how it reflects the miniature creature craze of the early 80s, where studios desperately hoped lightning would strike twice. Instead, it proved that just making something smaller and cuter wasn't enough. If anything, the Biscuits are remembered today as an odd relic, a show so eager to ride the Smurf wave it forgot to find its own identity. Meatballs and Spaghetti, 1982. Sometimes the weirdest ideas come from trying too hard to be hip. Meatballs and Spaghetti was Hanna-Barbera's attempt to tap into the early 80s music craze. It starred a married rock and roll duo. Meatballs, a big, goofy slob, and Spaghetti, his petite, glamorous wife. Together with their dog Woofer and a roadie named Clyde, They toured the country performing songs and stumbling into kid-friendly adventures. The animation was cheap, the songs were cheesier than the name implied, and the mismatched couple drew more snickers than admiration. Critics weren't impressed, and kids weren't exactly clamoring for cartoon rock ballads on Saturday mornings. It ran for just 13 episodes, and then vanished. Today, it's remembered mostly by hardcore collectors as one of Hanna-Barbera's strangest swings. Proof that you can't force-feed coolness to kids, especially not with a show named after Italian food. Kissy-Fur, 1986. The name alone is enough to raise eyebrows. Kissy-Fur followed a circus bear cub and his father who escaped to live in a swamp. It sounds like the setup for a touching father-son tale, but the execution was strange. The swamp was populated by quirky animals and bumbling gators who tried, and failed, to eat the cub. Tonally, the show wobbled between heartfelt drama and silly antics, leaving audiences unsure what to make of it. The character designs, with their wide eyes and exaggerated cuteness, didn't help. Some kids adored Kissy-Fur, while others found it cloying and vaguely uncomfortable. The show ran longer than most on this list, 3 seasons, but has largely been forgotten. Today, it's mostly remembered for its odd title, its uneven tone, and the fact that it was one of the rare cartoons to center on a single-parent family. Sweet? Sure. Weird? Absolutely. Rude Dog and the Dweebs, 1989. By the end of the 80s, mascots with attitude were everywhere. Networks wanted something that looked rebellious, sounded cool, and screamed, "This isn't your parents' cartoon." Enter Rude Dog, a neon-colored pooch in sunglasses who barked orders at a gang of misfit mutts called the Dweebs. Originally created to sell t-shirts, Rude Dog was as much a fashion accessory as a character. His surfer dude slang and too cool for rules vibe felt forced even at the time. The Dweebs, meanwhile, were bumbling sidekicks who existed mostly to be yelled at. Critics slammed the show for being grating rather than entertaining, and kids didn't exactly beg for more. It aired just 1 season before disappearing into obscurity. Today, Rude Dog stands as a reminder of how hard the 80s tried to package cool into cartoons. Instead of radical, he came off as rude, and not in a good way. The Gary Coleman Show, 1982. At the peak of his Different Strokes fame, Gary Coleman was a household name. NBC decided to capitalize by giving him an animated alter ego, only instead of wisecracking Arnold Jackson, Coleman voiced an angel. Yes, in this short-lived series, Gary returned to Earth as a celestial being tasked with helping kids solve their problems. His character, Andy LeBeau, used a mix of angel powers, moral lessons, and charm to set things right. On paper, it was wholesome. On screen, it was surreal. Seeing a real-life child star reimagined as a cartoon guardian angel blurred the line between celebrity branding and fantasy in ways that baffled audiences. Kids tuning in for snappy one-liners instead got gentle lectures and glowing halos. The show lasted just 13 episodes, quickly joining the ranks of forgotten celebrity cartoons. Today, it's mostly remembered as one of the strangest attempts to transform a TV star into an animated role model. Fangface, 1979 to 1981. Imagine Scooby-Doo, but swap the dog for a teenage werewolf who transformed at the sight of the moon, or even just a picture of one. That was Fangface. Each episode featured a group of teens solving mysteries while their buddy Fangs morphed into a wolfish creature who was more liability than asset. The transformations were wild, full of exaggerated animation that veered between goofy and unsettling. Fangface was supposed to be comic relief, but often ended up derailing the story. Critics quickly noted that it felt like a low-rent copy of Hanna-Barbera's bigger hits. Still, the show hung around in syndication, baffling new audiences well into the 80s. Today, Fangface survives as a cult curiosity, an awkward mashup of Scooby-Doo hijinks and supernatural slapstick. Proof that not every formula tweak deserves its own spin-off. Bionic 6, 1987. Superheroes dominated the 80s, but Bionic 6 took the concept in a truly odd direction. Instead of a lone hero, it was an entire family, mom, dad, and 4 kids, granted cybernetic powers after a freak accident. They fought crime together, blending family sitcom banter with high-tech battles. On paper, it sounded fresh, like the Brady Bunch meets the X-Men. But the execution was strange. Watching an entire family bicker while punching out villains gave the show a disjointed tone. Add in clunky dialogue about bionic teamwork, and it sometimes felt more like a PSA than a superhero series. Still, Bionic 6 had impressive animation for its time and ran longer than most on this list, 2 seasons. Today, it's remembered with a mix of nostalgia and confusion. A reminder that the 80s weren't afraid to combine genres, even when the result was a little mechanical. Potato Head Kids, 1986. When a toy sells well, the cartoon is never far behind. After the modest success of Mr. Potato Head, networks tried to spin his world into a Saturday morning franchise. The result was Potato Head Kids, a show about, well, spuds with sneakers, baseball caps, and barely there personalities. Each kid was a stereotype. The jock, the nerd, the fashionista, except they were potatoes. Episodes revolved around playground squabbles, light mysteries, and endless puns. The problem was obvious. The characters weren't engaging, and the whole concept felt stretched thinner than a French fry. It ran as part of the Potato Head Kids show block, but was quickly forgotten, never building the toy-selling power of bigger franchises. Today, the Potato Head Kids are remembered mostly by collectors as one of the strangest, least inspired attempts to force a toy line into cartoon stardom. Proof that sometimes a potato is just a potato. The Snorks, 1984. When the Smurfs became a cultural juggernaut, every studio wanted its own version of tiny creatures with a gimmick. Hanna-Barbera answered with the Snorks, little undersea beings who lived in a colorful kingdom beneath the waves. Their defining feature? Each one had a snorkel-like tube sticking out of their heads that honked, bubbled, or flashed when they spoke. The show followed their day-to-day adventures, which were essentially Smurf plots repackaged underwater. While it wasn't exactly a flop, it ran for 4 seasons. The Snorks never achieved the same magic. Critics said it felt derivative, and kids often saw them as off-brand Smurfs. Today, the Snorks are remembered with a mix of fondness and mild embarrassment. Quirky? Yes. Weird? Definitely. They're proof that even the most successful formulas can't always be cloned. Shirt Tales, 1982. If you thought talking animals were strange, Shirt Tales took it one step further. This gang of critters lived inside a tree at a city park and wore T-shirts that magically displayed their thoughts in glowing letters. There was Rick the Tiger, Pammy the Panda, Tig the Tiger Cub, and a few others, all spouting their inner feelings through blinking neon text. The gimmick was eye-catching but also deeply odd. Imagine every time you had a thought, it popped up across your chest in glowing words. Beyond the gimmick, the stories were standard kid fare, solving problems, foiling bumbling villains, but the T-shirt trick gave the show a surreal edge. The series only lasted 2 seasons before fading away, yet it's still remembered today as one of Hanna-Barbera's quirkier experiments. Proof that even the simplest what-if idea could become a Saturday morning cartoon. Popples, 1986. Plush toys ruled the 80s, so it was inevitable that someone would create a cartoon around them. The Popples were neon puffballs with long ears who could fold themselves into Little balls spring back out and cause chaos wherever they went. They were marketed as cute and playful, but on screen, their antics often veered into hyperactive mayhem. The transformations looked both adorable and a little uncanny as the characters twisted and squashed themselves into shapes that didn't quite line up with their bodies. Kids either loved the Toy Toon tie-in or found it exhausting to watch. The series ran for 2 seasons before being retired to the toy chest of history. Today, Popples are a cult memory, dug up occasionally by collectors and retro fans. Strange, loud, and undeniably 80s, they remain one of the decade's weirdest toy-based creations. Floyd the Alligator, 1986. Most cartoons had villains who were comically inept, but Floyd the Alligator stood out for being both oddly menacing and ridiculously silly. As the main antagonist in Kissy-Fur, Floyd and his sidekick, another gator named Jolene, constantly schemed to capture and eat the bear cub hero. On paper, that sounds dark. A children's cartoon about predators hunting a child. But the execution was full of slapstick, bad jokes, and endless pratfalls. Floyd's nasal voice and bumbling mannerisms made him more clown than threat, even as the premise stayed unnervingly grim. Parents were puzzled, kids were divided, and critics weren't sure what to make of him. He's remembered today as one of the strangest villains of the decade, a reminder that sometimes the weirdest characters aren't the heroes, but the supposed threats they face. The Noozles 1988, imported from Japan and dubbed for American audiences, The Noozles was unlike anything else on Saturday mornings. It featured 2 magical koalas, Blinky and Pinky, who entered the life of a young girl named Sandy. Their gimmick? A sneeze-inducing hug that could transport characters into surreal dream worlds filled with pastel landscapes and whimsical creatures. The animation was bright and cheerful, but the premise was deeply strange, half adventure, half fever dream. Each episode blurred the line between reality and fantasy, leaving kids unsure whether Sandy was on a magical journey or just imagining it all. The Noozles lasted only 1 season in the US, but it left a lasting impression. To this day, fans describe it as one of the most bizarrely enchanting imports of the 80s. Equal parts adorable and unsettling, it earns the top spot on our list. So there you have it, 15 of the weirdest cartoon creations the 80s ever unleashed. These characters prove Saturday mornings weren't always about heroes saving the day. Sometimes they were about cubes with faces, gators chasing circus bears, or animals flashing neon t-shirts. Most shows vanished quickly, but their strangeness made them unforgettable. They're the cartoons you stumble across years later and wonder, that was real. If you enjoyed this trip back, hit like, subscribe, and share your favorite forgotten oddball in the comments.